When the millionaire saw his ex-wife walk into his wedding holding hands with two 3-year-old twin boys, a cold shiver ran down his spine. He instantly knew they weren't strangers. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The dim light of the table lamp cast long shadows across Sarah Johnson's small Pilsen apartment. 22 years old, with dark circles under her eyes from working double shifts at Magnolia Restaurant and the local bookstore to pay for her night business classes, she paced nervously, rehearsing the words in her mind. The cheap kettle whistled on the stove, and she poured hot water into two mismatched mugs, dropping a tea bag into one and instant coffee into the other. The clock on the wall, its plastic frame cracked at one corner, read 7:15 in the evening. Maxwell Reed would arrive any minute now. The thought sent another wave of nausea through her body, morning sickness that persisted well into the evening. Sarah glanced around the one-bedroom apartment. She'd cleaned frantically that morning, but there was no disguising the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the coffee table with one leg slightly shorter than the others, propped up by a folded magazine. This place was a far cry from Maxwell's world of penthouses and mansions, but it was all she could afford while working her way through college. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Sarah smoothed down her simple cotton dress and took a deep breath. She opened the door to find Maxwell Reed, 32, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. "You're early," she said, forcing a smile. Maxwell stepped inside, his eyes scanning the apartment with barely concealed disdain. He adjusted the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, a $40,000 timepiece she'd once admired, and he'd casually mentioned he owned 3 others. "I have a dinner meeting at 9, he replied, declining to kiss her as he normally would. "You said it was urgent?" Sarah gestured to the worn armchair, the only comfortable seat in the room besides the sagging sofa. "Please, sit. Would you like some coffee?" Maxwell accepted the mug without enthusiasm, not taking a sip. "What's this about, Sarah? Your message sounded concerning." She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling slightly around her tea mug. The warmth from the ceramic was comforting against her cold fingers. The speech she'd rehearsed all day evaporated from her mind. "I'm pregnant, Max," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Maxwell remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. Finally, he placed the untouched coffee on the scratched coffee table and stood, adjusting his watch again in a gesture she now recognized as a nervous habit. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked, his voice cold and detached. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. 6 months of passionate romance, whispered promises in luxury hotel rooms, weekend getaways to his lake house, all erased with 5 cruel words. "How can you ask me that?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Maxwell paced the small living room, stopping at the window to look out at the working-class neighborhood. "Look around you, Sarah." He gestured broadly at the modest apartment. "Do you really believe you can be part of my world? A waitress from South Side with an incomplete degree?" "I thought what we had was real," she responded, her voice breaking. "You said you loved me. What we had was convenient, fun, while it lasted." Maxwell opened his Italian leather briefcase and removed a checkbook. "I'll resolve this for both of us." The sound of his pen scratching against paper was unbearably loud in the silent apartment. He tore the check from the book and placed it on the coffee table between them. $50,000, he said flatly. "Enough for the procedure and to start over somewhere else. Away from Chicago, away from me." Sarah stared at the check, comprehension slowly dawning. "You're paying me to abort our child?" "I'm being generous," Maxwell replied, straightening his tie. "My family has expectations, Sarah. In 6 months, I'll announce my engagement to Caroline Henderson. It's been planned for years. You are—" He paused, selecting his words. "Insufficient. Without the background, without the education, without the connections. It would be cruel to bring a child into this world knowing they would never be accepted by the Reed family." Each word cut deeper than any blade could. Sarah felt something harden inside her as Maxwell continued. "You're boring, predictable, and without the potential I look for in a partner. This check is more money than you'd make in years. Use it wisely and forget we ever met." He walked to the door, pausing briefly with his hand on the knob. "Don't contact me again. My lawyers have instructions to deal with any future inconvenience." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Sarah collapsed onto the floor, the untouched check on the table beside her. The tears she'd been holding back finally broke free, her body shaking with silent sobs that gradually turned to audible ones, echoing in the empty apartment. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the employee locker room at Magnolia, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, her waitress uniform tighter around her midsection. The morning sickness had gotten worse, causing her to rush to the bathroom twice during her shift. "Johnson!" The manager's voice cut through her nausea. "My office. Now." In the small office with its wall of awards and press clippings, Mr. Kendall didn't invite her to sit. "Customers have noticed you running to the bathroom, and your uniform—" "I've been ill, sir. Just a stomach bug," Sarah lied. "Don't insult my intelligence." His eyes dropped pointedly to her stomach. "You're showing. We can't have pregnant waitstaff serving our clientele. It makes them uncomfortable." "But I need this job," Sarah protested. "I've always received excellent reviews." "Your severance pay is in this envelope. 2 weeks. That's generous, considering." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Without the Magnolia job, she couldn't afford her apartment and tuition. Her bookstore job barely covered groceries. "Please," she whispered. "I have no family, no support." "Not my problem," Mr. Kendall replied, already turning his attention to paperwork. "Magnolia has a reputation to maintain." A month later, Sarah sat on a thin mattress in Chicago's women's shelter, one of 60 women sharing a large open room. Her few possessions were packed in a single suitcase beside her. The eviction notice had come 2 days after she'd missed rent. No extensions offered despite her 6 months of perfect payment history. Her hand rested on her stomach, now visibly swollen beneath her loose sweater. The severe morning sickness had been diagnosed as hyperemesis gravidarum, causing her to lose the bookstore job after collapsing during her shift. Without income, everything had unraveled with terrifying speed. "Johnson?" a volunteer called from the doorway. "Phone call." In the cramped office, Sarah picked up the receiver. "Hello?" "Sarah, it's Dr. Patel from the free clinic. Your test results came back. We need you to come in tomorrow morning." "Is something wrong with the baby?" Fear gripped her chest. "Nothing wrong, but there's something we need to discuss in person. Can you be here at 9? The free clinic's ultrasound room was cold, the paper covering the examination table crinkling beneath Sarah as the technician moved the wand across her gel-covered abdomen. "There," Dr. Patel said, pointing to the grainy screen. "Do you see?" Sarah squinted at the monitor. "I see the baby, yes." "Babies," Dr. Patel corrected gently. "You're carrying twins, Sarah. That's why your symptoms have been so severe. 2 heartbeats." Sarah stared at the screen, watching the 2 distinct fluttering pulses. Twins. 2 lives growing inside her, depending completely on her for survival when she could barely keep herself alive. "I'll give you a moment," Dr. Patel said, sensing her overwhelming emotions. "The technician will print some pictures for you." Alone in the examination room, Sarah's hand moved to her belly. "Twins," she whispered. For the first time since Maxwell had walked out, she felt something other than despair, a fierce, protective determination igniting in her chest. In the waiting room, Sarah stopped at the receptionist's desk. "Is there a trash can I could use?" The receptionist pointed to a small bin near the water cooler. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded check. $50,000 made out to Sarah Johnson, signed by Maxwell Reed. The check she'd carried with her for weeks, unable to cash it but unwilling to destroy her lifeline. With steady hands, she tore it into tiny pieces, letting the fragments fall into the bin. Watching the pieces of Maxwell's generosity disappear, Sarah made a solemn promise to the children growing inside her. He said, "I'm insufficient, that I have no potential. I'll show him how wrong he was. One day I'll look him in the eyes not as a victim, but as an equal. No, as his superior. And you two will be my greatest victory, not my downfall." Walking out of the clinic, Sarah Johnson squared her shoulders. The path ahead would be harder than anything she'd ever faced, but she would build something extraordinary from these ashes. Something that would one day force Maxwell Reed to recognize the magnitude of what he'd thrown away. 15 years later, when Maxwell Reed would see Sarah again, she wouldn't be the desperate waitress he'd abandoned, but a billionaire CEO whose empire would eclipse his own. And the biggest shock wouldn't even be this. Dawn broke coldly over Chicago, the January air biting through Sarah's thin jacket as she huddled in the employee bathroom of the Chicago Grand Hotel. Her stomach heaved violently for the third time that morning, her body trembling from exhaustion and morning sickness. 5 months pregnant with twins, she'd managed to hide her condition beneath the loose gray housekeeping uniform, a size larger than she needed. "You okay in there, Johnson?" Maria, the head housekeeper, knocked on the stall door. "We've got 15 suites to clean before checkout. Presidential suite has VIPs leaving at 11. Sarah wiped her mouth with toilet paper, the rough industrial kind that scraped her lips. "Coming," she called, her voice hoarse. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself, hollowed cheeks, dark circles like bruises beneath her eyes, skin sallow despite her youth. She splashed cold water on her face and straightened the name tag pinned to her uniform. Sarah J. "You look like death," Maria said bluntly, handing her a stack of fresh towels. "How many months?" Sarah froze. "I don't. Please. I've had 4 children. You can't hide it forever, especially not twins." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her belly. "How did you know?" "The way you're carrying. Plus, you're sicker than normal. Don't worry, I won't report you. Just work fast and don't let management see you throwing up." Sarah nodded gratefully, taking the housekeeping cart. 5 months ago, she'd been serving champagne at Magnolia. Now she cleaned up after the people who could afford to drink it. The service elevator took her to the 35th floor, where the presidential suite occupied the corner with views of Lake Michigan. Inside, the remnants of wealth were scattered everywhere. Empty Dom Perignon bottles, designer shopping bags, a Rolex left carelessly on the bathroom counter. Sarah worked methodically, stripping beds, scrubbing toilets, vacuuming carpets, all while fighting waves of nausea. On the coffee table, a discarded magazine caught her eye, Chicago Elite, its glossy cover featuring a smiling couple at a charity gala. Her hands trembled as she recognized Maxwell Reed's face, his arm wrapped possessively around a slender blonde woman in a designer gown. The heiress and the real estate prince. Maxwell Reed announces engagement to Caroline Henderson, Chicago's wedding of the year, read the headline. Sarah sank onto the king-sized bed she'd just made, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The article detailed their fairy tale romance, the $2 million wedding planned for June, and Caroline's Harvard education and impeccable lineage. It mentioned Maxwell's bright future as the heir to Reed Properties and their plans to continue both distinguished family lines. A photo spread showed the 5-carat diamond engagement ring, the couple's matching designer watches, their Hamptons summer home. Every image, every word, a reminder of what Maxwell had meant when he'd called Sarah insufficient. The $5,000 per night bed she sat on cost more than everything she owned. A sharp kick from within her womb jolted her back to reality. "I know," she whispered, placing her hand over the spot. "I feel it too." She tucked the magazine into her cart. Later, she'd cut out the article, not as a memento, but as motivation. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Sarah rushed to change uniforms in the employee bathroom, swapping the hotel gray for the bright blue of Quick Stop convenience store. No time for lunch, every dollar counted, every hour of work necessary for survival. "You're late, Johnson," barked Mr. Patel, the store owner. "Third time this week." "I'm sorry, the hotel had a late checkout," Sarah explained, tying the blue apron around her expanding waistline. "I'll stay late to make up the time." "See that you do, and try looking less—" He gestured vaguely at her exhausted face. "Like that. You're scaring the customers." For the next 6 hours, Sarah operated the register, restocked shelves, and mopped floors. Her ankles swelled painfully in the cheap sneakers she'd bought at a thrift store, 2 sizes larger to accommodate the swelling. Customers were impatient, counting out pennies and nickels with irritation when her trembling hands moved too slowly. "Maybe if you weren't so sloppy, you wouldn't be in this situation," an older woman in an expensive coat muttered, eyeing Sarah's pregnant form with disgust as she purchased her lottery tickets. Sarah said nothing, handing over the tickets and change with a practiced, neutral expression. 4 more hours. Just 4 more hours until she could rest. Except there was no rest. Only her third job of the day waiting. At 9:30 at night, Sarah sat in a cubicle at Midwest Marketing Solutions, a headset pressing uncomfortably against her ear, reading from a script selling magazine subscriptions. Her voice, once bright and engaging when she served cocktails at Magnolia, had become a monotone recitation. "Yes, ma'am. The special offer includes 12 monthly issues for just $19.95, a savings of over 40% off the newsstand price," she recited for the 30th time that evening, one hand absently stroking her belly beneath the desk where no one could see. "Johnson!" Her supervisor's voice cut through the call center's fluorescent haze. "That's your third bathroom break in 2 hours. We have quotas to meet." "I'm sorry, Ms. Hendricks. It's just, I don't care if you're growing the next Jesus Christ in there," the woman hissed, leaning close to avoid being overheard. "If you can't meet your targets, there are 20 people waiting for your position. Understood?" Sarah nodded, swallowing the retort that burned her throat. Another 4 hours of this, then the night bus home. If she could call the shelter home. Just past 2 in the morning, Sarah reclined the driver's seat of her 15-year-old Honda Civic as far as it would go, which wasn't nearly enough to accommodate her pregnant form. The women's shelter had been full tonight, no beds available. Her apartment application had been rejected again, the 5th one this month. No landlord wanted a single pregnant woman with no stable income and terrible credit after her eviction. The car was parked in a 24-hour supermarket lot where the security guards generally left her alone if she bought something in the morning. She'd folded her housekeeping uniform into a makeshift pillow and draped her convenience store apron over her legs for extra warmth. February in Chicago was merciless. Despite her exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she pulled out a battered notebook, its cover adorned with coffee stains and creased corners. Under the dim glow of the parking lot lights, she wrote in neat, determined handwriting, "Observations on effective management, Chicago Grand Hotel. 1. Current system wastes 35% of staff time with inefficient room assignments. 2. No incentive structure for housekeepers, resulting in inconsistent quality. 3. Opportunity. Mobile check-in would reduce front desk congestion and improve guest satisfaction." She flipped to another section labeled Customer Service Failures, Quick Stop. 1. Inventory system outdated, high-demand items frequently out of stock during peak hours. 2. Employee training insufficient, average transaction takes 2 minutes when it should take under 1 minute. 3. Opportunity. Self-checkout option would reduce lines and free staff for other tasks. A final section titled Business Models to Explore contained detailed notes on various industries, their profit margins, market trends, and barriers to entry. Each page a testament to a mind that absorbed everything, analyzed constantly, and refused to surrender to circumstances. One of the twins kicked sharply, followed by the second one, as if they were playing soccer with her internal organs. "You two never sleep, do you?" she whispered with a tired smile. "Just like your mother." The public library opened at 9, and Sarah was waiting at the door, having freshened up as best she could in a gas station bathroom. 3 precious hours before her hotel shift began, time to use the free computers. She logged into the online business courses she'd found, working through modules on accounting, marketing, and business strategy. Her browser tabs were a roadmap of ambition: small business administration resources, tech startups with minimal capital, patents and intellectual property basics. "Excuse me," a gentle voice interrupted her concentration. An older woman with kind eyes and a name badge identifying her as a social worker stood beside her. "Are you Sarah Johnson? The shelter called me. They said you might need assistance." Sarah straightened, immediately defensive. "I'm fine. Thank you." The woman sat down anyway. "I'm Margaret Wilson. I work with pregnant women in difficult circumstances." Her eyes took in Sarah's exhaustion, the housekeeping uniform peeking from her bag. "The shelter mentioned you're expecting twins." "Yes." Sarah's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Have you considered all your options?" Margaret asked gently. "2 babies, no stable housing, multiple jobs. It's a tremendous challenge for anyone." "What options?" Sarah's voice hardened. "Well, adoption is a beautiful choice. There are many wonderful couples who—" "No." The word was final, brooking no argument. "It's not a reflection on you," Margaret continued kindly. "Sometimes the most loving choice is to give your children opportunities you can't provide." Sarah looked directly into the woman's eyes, her gaze unwavering. "My children are the only thing that no one will take from me. Not now, not ever." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "You know, there's a program for single mothers that might help. Subsidized housing, childcare assistance, educational opportunities. The waiting list is long, but with your situation, what do I need to do?" Sarah asked, already pulling out her notebook. The prenatal clinic for indigent women was crowded, the chairs in the waiting room hard plastic that made Sarah's back ache. She'd taken her lunch break from the hotel to make this appointment and would have to skip eating to make it back on time. Dr. Campbell, a tired but compassionate obstetrician who volunteered at the clinic twice weekly, smiled as she examined the ultrasound screen. "Well, Ms. Johnson, looks like you're having twin boys, both looking healthy despite the rough start." "Boys?" Sarah whispered, staring at the grainy images. "Definitely. See here and here?" The doctor pointed. "No doubt about it. Any names picked out?" Sarah had thought about this in the quiet hours of the night during endless shifts and bus rides. "Noah and Ethan," she said confidently. "Noah and Ethan Johnson. Johnson, just Johnson." Dr. Campbell nodded, understanding the omission of any father's name. "Strong names, classical but contemporary." As Sarah gathered her things to leave, the doctor handed her some pamphlets. "The hospital has a program for mothers without insurance, and this shelter specifically helps women with newborns." She hesitated. "Is the father involved at all?" "There is no father," Sarah replied firmly. "Just me." On the bus back to the hotel, Sarah opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "For Noah and Ethan," followed by a list of promises, plans, and dreams that seemed impossible in her current reality, but that she vowed to make come true. While Maxwell signed the prenuptial agreement that would protect his fortune from his future bride, he couldn't imagine that the woman cleaning the rooms where his wedding guests would stay was silently learning how to one day own the entire hotel. Sarah's water broke as she was tucking fresh sheets into the corner of a king-sized bed on the 14th floor of the Chicago Grand Hotel. The first sharp pain hit her with such intensity that she gasped, clutching the edge of the mattress. Glancing down, she saw the telltale wetness spreading across her uniform. "Not now," she whispered, calculating frantically. 7 months along, too early. The twins weren't due for another 8 weeks. Pressing a hand against her swollen belly, she took a deep breath and continued making the bed, wincing through another contraction. She couldn't afford to leave mid-shift. She needed every hour, every dollar. Methodically, she smoothed the comforter, placed the pillows, and arranged the complimentary chocolates on the nightstand. As she wheeled her cart to the next room, a contraction strong enough to double her overhit. Maria rounded the corner just in time to see Sarah leaning against the wall, face contorted in pain. "Dios mío, you're in labor!" Maria rushed to her side. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No, no ambulance," Sarah managed through gritted teeth. "Too expensive. I'll take the bus." "The bus? You're having babies!" Maria looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "At least let me call you a taxi." "I can't have—" Another contraction cut her words short. "No arguments. Carlos at the front desk owes me a favor." Maria helped Sarah to the service elevator. "You're leaving now." 30 minutes later, Sarah sat alone in the back of a taxi, counting the minutes between contractions and watching the meter tick upward with mounting anxiety. She had exactly $73 in her wallet, everything she'd saved that week after paying for her prenatal vitamins. At Chicago Memorial Hospital, the emergency room was chaotic. A car accident had brought in multiple trauma victims. Sarah approached the intake desk, another contraction gripping her. "I'm in labor," she managed. "Twins. 7 months." The next hours passed in a blur of pain, bright lights, and medical terminology. Sarah was whisked to labor and delivery, hooked to monitors that showed her baby's rapid heartbeats, and examined by a series of doctors with concerned expressions. "The babies are in distress," a doctor finally told her. "We need to perform an emergency C-section." "Will they be okay?" Sarah asked, terrified. "They're so early." "We have an excellent NICU," the doctor assured her. "But I won't lie. Premature twins face challenges. We'll do everything we can." As they prepped her for surgery, a nurse asked, "Is there someone we should call? The father? Family?" Sarah shook her head. "There's no one." The operating room was cold. Sarah shivered as they administered the spinal block, feeling the strange numbness spread through her lower body. A blue sheet was raised across her chest, blocking her view of the procedure. "You'll feel some pressure," the doctor warned. The pressure came, intense and strange. Sarah stared at the ceiling, tears sliding silently down her temples into her hair. This wasn't how she'd imagined bringing her sons into the world, alone on an operating table, unable to even afford the taxi that brought her here. A thin, reedy cry broke the clinical quiet of the room. "Baby A is out," the doctor announced. "It's a boy, as expected." Seconds later, another cry, weaker than the first. "Baby B has arrived, both boys." The medical team worked quickly, whisking the newborns to warming stations. Sarah caught only glimpses, tiny red bodies, impossibly small limbs flailing. "How are they?" she asked, her voice breaking. 4 pounds, 1 ounce and 3 pounds, 9 ounces, a nurse reported. "They need to go to the NICU immediately." "Can I see them? Please, just for a second?" The nurse hesitated, then briefly brought each swaddled bundle to Sarah's face. Noah, with a shock of dark hair and a fierce cry. Ethan, smaller and quieter, his tiny face scrunched in concentration. "Hello," Sarah whispered, unable to touch them with her arms strapped down. "I'm your mom. I'm going to take care of you. I promise." Then they were gone, rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit, and Sarah was left alone again as the doctors finished her surgery. In the recovery room, when the nurse asked about insurance, Sarah's post-surgical haze lifted abruptly. "I don't have any," she admitted, "but there's a program for indigent mothers. I have the pamphlet in my bag." The nurse's expression softened with sympathy. "I'll have social services come speak with you." Alone in the sterile room, Sarah finally allowed herself to cry. Not just from the physical pain, but from the crushing weight of bringing 2 vulnerable lives into the world with nothing to offer them but her determination. 4 days later, Sarah was discharged, her body still recovering from major surgery, her heart breaking at leaving the hospital without her babies. Noah and Ethan would remain in the NICU for weeks, possibly months. "You can visit any time," the NICU nurse assured her. "They need to hear your voice, feel your touch." "I'll be here," Sarah promised, not explaining that she'd already lost her hotel job for missing shifts and would have to find new work immediately just to afford the bus fare to visit her sons. The program for indigent mothers had come through with emergency housing, a small room in a transitional living facility for women with children. The social worker, Ms. Patterson, helped Sarah settle in. "It's temporary," Ms. Patterson explained, showing Sarah the narrow bed and shared bathroom down the hall. "But you can stay until the babies are ready to come home, and we'll work on finding something more permanent." "Thank you," Sarah said, placing her single suitcase on the bed. "When can I see my sons again?" "There's a bus that goes directly to the hospital, leaves every hour." Ms. Patterson hesitated. "Sarah, have you thought about what happens when the babies are discharged, caring for premature twins alone while working?" "I'll manage," Sarah said firmly. "I always do." The NICU became Sarah's second home. Every morning she woke at 4:30, took the first bus to the hospital, and spent 45 precious minutes with each baby before looking for work. Noah and Ethan lay in separate incubators, connected to monitors and feeding tubes, their tiny bodies dwarfed by the medical equipment sustaining them. On her third visit, Sarah brought 2 books checked out from the public library: Marketing Principles and Fundamentals of Business Management. "Time for today's lesson," she told Noah, opening the marketing book as she sat beside his incubator, her hand through the opening to let him grasp her finger. "Today we're learning about market segmentation and target demographics." She read in a soft, clear voice, explaining concepts as if the newborn could understand, occasionally stopping to comment on how they might apply these principles someday. With Ethan, she read from the management book, her voice never faltering despite her exhaustion. "Effective leadership requires vision," she read. "A good leader sees possibilities where others see obstacles." Nurse Jacobs paused during her rounds, listening to Sarah explaining the concept of organizational structure to her days-old son. "I've never seen a mother read business books to newborns before," she commented with a gentle smile. Sarah looked up, momentarily embarrassed. "Is it silly?" "Not at all. They recognize your voice from the womb. What you're reading doesn't matter. Your presence does." Nurse Jacobs adjusted Ethan's monitor. "Though they might be the youngest future CEOs we've ever had in this unit." "They will be," Sarah said with absolute conviction. "They'll grow up knowing the value of knowledge." Weeks passed. Sarah found work as a data entry clerk during the day and a janitor at an office building at night. Between shifts, she visited her sons, watching them grow stronger daily. Noah, the larger of the twins, was meeting his developmental milestones quickly. Ethan struggled more, requiring additional oxygen and specialized feeding. The day they finally removed Ethan's breathing tube was the first time Sarah allowed herself to believe both her sons would survive. That night, exhausted but hopeful, she returned to the shelter and added a new page to her notebook. First business ventures to explore when the boys are in school. 3 months after their birth, Noah was discharged. 2 weeks later, Ethan joined them. The tiny room at the transitional housing facility suddenly felt even smaller with 2 bassinets squeezed alongside Sarah's narrow bed. "You did it," Ms. Patterson said during her weekly check-in. "They're thriving against all odds. You should be proud." Sarah cradled Ethan, the smaller twin still needing extra attention, while Noah slept nearby. "This is just the beginning," she replied. "I've applied for the subsidized housing program and enrolled in night classes to finish my business degree." "How will you manage classes with newborns?" "One day at a time," Sarah said, "and I've found a subsidized daycare that accepts infants." On her first night of class at Chicago Community College, Sarah sat in the back row of the business administration lecture, exhausted from a day of caring for the twins and working her data entry job. As the professor discussed market analysis, she took meticulous notes, determined not to waste this opportunity. In the campus library afterward, organizing her study schedule, Sarah noticed another woman about her age, equally exhausted, surrounded by accounting textbooks. "Regression analysis is killing me," the woman muttered, pushing her glasses up her nose. "It gets easier after the third chapter," Sarah offered. "The examples on page 97 are helpful." The woman looked up, surprised. "You're in Accounting 201? I took it last semester. I'm Sarah, by the way." "Miranda Chen, are you an accounting major?" "Business administration. You?" "Finance and accounting." Miranda gestured to her stack of books. "Though I'm beginning to regret it." They worked silently for a while until Miranda checked her watch. "Library's closing in 10 minutes and I still haven't figured out these problems. My exam is Thursday." Sarah hesitated, then made a decision. "I could help you. I'm good with statistics." "Really? That would be amazing." Miranda brightened, then frowned. "But I couldn't ask you to—" "Tell you what," Sarah proposed. "I'll help you with statistics on Sunday if you could watch my twins Thursday evening during my exam." "Twins?" Miranda looked surprised. "You have children?" "4-month-old boys." Sarah showed her a picture on her flip phone. "You're taking a full course load with infant twins?" Miranda looked impressed. "That's incredible. Deal. I'll watch them Thursday. You save my GPA on Sunday." The arrangement proved beneficial for both women. Miranda, who came from a large family but had no children of her own, became enchanted with Noah and Ethan. Sarah found that explaining accounting concepts to Miranda helped solidify her own understanding. One Sunday, Miranda arrived at Sarah's subsidized apartment to find her explaining market concepts to the twins while simultaneously breastfeeding them. "Supply and demand, my little economists," Sarah was saying. "When demand increases but supply remains constant, what happens?" "That's right, prices rise." Miranda laughed. "Starting them early, I see." "It's never too early for education," Sarah replied, expertly shifting Ethan to her shoulder to burp him without disturbing Noah. "You're amazing," Miranda said, taking Ethan so Sarah could focus on Noah. "I can barely handle my houseplants, and you're raising twins while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Sarah said simply. Later that evening, after solving particularly complex accounting problems, they took a break in the small communal kitchen. The twins were finally asleep in their second-hand cribs, giving Sarah a rare moment of peace. The ancient television in the corner of the kitchen was tuned to a local business report. Sarah froze, soup spoon halfway to her mouth, as Maxwell Reed's face appeared on screen. "Reed Properties is expanding into new markets," he announced confidently, the camera panning over a model of a luxury development. "We project 40% growth in the next 2 years." Miranda followed Sarah's gaze to the screen. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah's expression hardened, a new resolution crystallizing. "Not a ghost, just someone who once told me I had no potential." She turned back to her accounting textbook with renewed determination. "I won't just survive, I'm going to surpass him." 12 years later, when Forbes published its annual list of America's most influential entrepreneurs, Sarah Johnson's name would appear 16 positions above Maxwell Reed's. 3 years had transformed Sarah Johnson's life in ways both profound and mundane. The twins had grown from fragile NICU babies into sturdy 3-year-olds with matching dimples and an uncanny ability to finish each other's sentences. Her subsidized apartment, while still modest, now contained proper furniture, a second-hand sofa instead of salvaged crates, twin beds for the boys decorated with robot-themed comforters they'd chosen themselves, and a small desk where Sarah studied late into the night after tucking them in. Most significantly, Sarah had graduated with honors in business administration, her diploma framed proudly on the wall beside crayon drawings of what Noah and Ethan imagined their mother's office would look like someday, all primary colors and stick figures, but with Mom invariably seated behind the biggest desk. On this particular Monday morning, Sarah adjusted her one respectable blazer, navy blue, purchased from a thrift store but carefully tailored to appear more expensive, and checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes after a weekend of nursing both boys through ear infections while completing a financial analysis for her boss at Smart Secure Solutions, the small software company where she'd worked as an administrative assistant for the past 11 months. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. One more step forward. At the twins' daycare, she knelt to kiss them goodbye, inhaling their clean, soapy scent. "Be good today. Miss Carla says you're learning about dinosaurs." "T-Rex!" Noah exclaimed, showing his teeth in a fearsome grimace. "Triceratops better," Ethan countered, making horns with his fingers. "Both amazing," Sarah assured them, standing and smoothing her skirt. "I'll be here at 5:30. I love you to the moon. And back and everywhere between." They finished together, their ritual complete. Smart Secure Solutions occupied the third floor of an aging office building downtown, its reception area decorated with outdated technology posters and fake plants gathering dust. As she did every morning, Sarah arrived 20 minutes early to organize the catastrophe that was Tom Wilson's desk before he arrived at 9. Tom, the company's founder and CEO, was brilliant with code but hopeless with organization. Today, his desk resembled an archaeological dig, coffee-stained documents from different eras layered upon one another, post-it notes in various states of adhesion, and at least 3 half-empty coffee mugs creating rings on important contracts. Sarah sorted methodically, creating logical piles, flagging documents requiring immediate attention, and transcribing the most important post-it reminders into Tom's digital calendar. She'd just finished when he burst through the door, his perpetually rumpled appearance making his 45 years look closer to 60. "Sarah, thank God you're here. Where's the Henderson proposal? The client meeting's in 30 minutes and I can't find—" She handed him a blue folder. "Right here. I updated the projections based on yesterday's numbers and added the security assessment they requested." Tom blinked, accepting the folder. "You did the projections too? That's not really your—" "I noticed discrepancies in the original calculations. The formula wasn't accounting for the software update costs in Q3. She hesitated. "I hope that's okay." Tom flipped through the documents, eyebrows rising. "This is extremely thorough. Where did you learn to do this kind of analysis?" "Night classes," Sarah replied. "I graduated last month. Business administration with a minor in information systems." "You've been taking classes this whole time? With twins?" Tom looked genuinely impressed. "Well, that explains how you reorganized our entire digital filing system last month. The team's been wondering how we suddenly became so efficient." Sarah smiled modestly. "The old system wasted approximately 4.2 hours of productivity per employee weekly. The new protocol reduces that to under an hour." Tom studied her with newfound respect. "Come to the Henderson meeting with me. I want you to hear how they respond to these projections." 3 months later, Sarah sat in the back of a conference room taking detailed notes as the engineering team debated security issues in their flagship product. While officially there to record minutes, she found herself mentally solving the problems they discussed, drawing connections they were missing. "The vulnerability persists because we're approaching it from the wrong angle," argued Raj, the lead developer. "The authentication protocol can't be patched. It needs to be completely rebuilt." "That would take months," protested Alyssa from QA. "We have the Forrester contract implementation in 6 weeks." As the debate grew heated, Sarah sketched a diagram in her notebook, a potential solution taking shape. After the meeting, she stayed late, the twins safely at Miranda's apartment for their weekly playdate with her cat. The Smart Secure office was quiet at night, just the hum of servers and the occasional ping of after-hours emails. Sarah used the solitude to access the company's development environment, not technically part of her job, but Tom had never been strict about access permissions. For weeks, she'd been teaching herself coding in the precious hours between the twins' bedtime and her own exhausted collapse. Now, she carefully constructed a prototype solution to the security vulnerability, testing it against various scenarios until 3 in the morning when her eyes burned too much to continue. At home, she crept into the apartment where Miranda had fallen asleep on the sofa, the twins curled up in their beds. Sarah kissed each boy's forehead before collapsing into her own bed for 3 hours of sleep before starting again. This became her routine: days as an administrative assistant, evenings with her sons, nights teaching herself programming and cybersecurity. On her laptop, a collection of potential solutions to Smart Secure's problems grew, none of which she felt confident enough to share. The crisis hit on a Tuesday in October. Sarah arrived to find the office in chaos, Tom pacing the conference room while developers huddled around computer screens, faces grim. "What's happening?" she asked Miranda, who'd been hired as a part-time accountant 6 months earlier on Sarah's recommendation. "Security breach at ValueTech, one of our biggest clients. Their entire system was compromised through a vulnerability in our software. They're threatening to sue for millions." By noon, the situation had deteriorated further. 2 other clients had suspended their contracts pending security reviews. An emergency investor call ended with funding threatened. By 4 o'clock, Tom emerged from his office, face ashen, to announce the first round of layoffs. "We need to cut 30% of staff immediately to stay afloat. HR will be conducting individual meetings starting tomorrow." As panic rippled through the office, Sarah made her decision. She waited until most employees had left, their departed colleagues' empty desks a stark reminder of the company's precarious position. Tom sat alone in his office, head in his hands, when Sarah knocked softly. "Not now, Sarah, unless it's the miracle we need." She stepped inside, clutching her laptop. "It might be. I have something that could help the company." Tom looked up, confusion replacing despair. "What are you talking about?" "I've been working on a solution to the security vulnerability. Not just a patch, a complete redesign of the authentication system that maintains compatibility with existing client implementations." "You've been what?" Tom straightened, incredulous. "You're an administrative assistant, with a business degree and self-taught programming skills." Sarah opened her laptop, turning it toward him. "I've been testing this prototype for weeks. It addresses the exact vulnerability that was exploited at ValueTech." Tom's expression cycled rapidly through disbelief, curiosity, and desperate hope as Sarah walked him through her solution. With each module she demonstrated, his eyebrows rose higher. "This is remarkable. How did you develop this without any formal training in software engineering?" "I read every manual I could find, took free online courses while the boys slept, studied our existing system until I understood its weaknesses." Sarah kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The solution uses multi-factor authentication with biometric verification, but implements it without requiring clients to completely overhaul their existing systems." Tom tested the prototype, methodically trying to break it, eyes widening when it withstood his attempts. "Sarah, this could save the company." He looked up at her, truly seeing her for the first time. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "I wasn't confident it was ready. The crisis accelerated my timeline." 3 days later, after intense testing by the development team, Smart Secure implemented Sarah's solution. ValueTech agreed to postpone legal action pending evaluation. Within 2 weeks, the security patch had been deployed to all clients, not a single one reporting vulnerabilities. Investors, impressed by the company's rapid response, reconsidered their funding threats. The layoffs were halted, then reversed as client confidence returned. Through it all, Sarah continued her administrative duties, saying nothing about her contribution until Tom called her into his office one Friday afternoon. "Close the door," he said, unusually serious. Sarah complied, heart sinking. Despite the company's recovery, perhaps her job was still at risk. "I've been doing some thinking," Tom began, leaning back in his chair. "You saved this company, Sarah, plain and simple. Without your solution, we'd be facing bankruptcy and lawsuits." "I'm glad I could help," she replied cautiously. "Help? You did more than help." Tom leaned forward. "I want to offer you a promotion. Manager of Product Development, effective immediately. And—" he slid a document across the desk. 2% ownership stake in Smart Secure. Sarah stared at the paper, momentarily speechless. "Ownership? You've earned it. The team respects you, especially now that they know who really saved their jobs." Tom smiled. "Plus, I suspect this is just the beginning of what you'll contribute." That evening, Sarah called Miranda from outside the twins' preschool. "I did it, me!" she exclaimed, voice trembling with excitement. "I'm in the game now." At home, Sarah found Noah and Ethan sitting on the living room floor, an open book between them. Before she could announce her news, Noah looked up and began reading aloud from the page. "Market strategies must consider competitor positioning and consumer demand." Ethan continued seamlessly. "Successful businesses identify unmet needs in the marketplace." Sarah froze, the promotion letter clutched in her hand. "You're reading? By yourselves?" "The book was open," Noah explained with a child's logic. "The words looked interesting," Ethan added. Sarah knelt beside them, gathering both boys into her arms, tears welling in her eyes. "You are so smart, so much smarter than I ever imagined." She held them tightly, feeling their small arms wrap around her neck. "We're going to build something incredible together. I promise." She didn't know it yet, but that modest security prototype developed during sleepless nights would become the foundation of technology that, in 7 years, would make Johnson Security Solutions a company valued at more than $100 million. 2 years after saving Smart Secure from collapse, Sarah Johnson stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the Chicago skyline shimmer in the early evening light. At 27, she had climbed from administrative assistant to senior manager of product development, overseeing a team of 12 engineers who had once doubted her abilities, but now sought her approval with eager respect. The view, however impressive, wasn't what occupied her thoughts. The email that had arrived an hour earlier sat open on her dual monitors. "Acquisition finalization. TechForge Systems welcomes Smart Secure." The California-based tech giant had purchased Smart Secure for $87 million, a price that would make Tom Wilson extremely wealthy and provide Sarah's 2% stake with a value of $1.7 million, money that could change everything for her and the twins. But there was a complication. Sarah turned as her office door opened, revealing Tom with champagne and plastic cups. "There's my security genius. Ready to celebrate? We're officially TechForge employees as of 9 a.m. tomorrow." "About that." Sarah gestured for Tom to sit. "I've been looking through TechForge's product roadmap. They're shelving our authentication system." Tom's celebratory mood faltered. "Well, acquisitions always involve some consolidation." "They're dismantling everything I've built," Sarah interrupted, sliding printouts across her desk. "My security protocol, the one that saved this company, they're replacing it with their existing system. It's inferior, Tom, vulnerable to the exact attacks we prevented." "Sarah, that's business. They bought us for our client list and market position, not necessarily our technology." Tom poured champagne despite her frown. "Besides, you'll be compensated handsomely, nearly $2 million. Think what that means for you and the boys." Sarah stared at the bubbling liquid in her cup. "It's not about the money, it's about what I created. What if I want to keep developing it?" Tom laughed nervously. "That's not how acquisitions work. Our IP belongs to TechForge now." "What if I negotiate for the rights to my system specifically?" Sarah leaned forward. "I'd forfeit my ownership stake in exchange for maintaining intellectual property rights to the authentication protocol I developed." You can't be serious." Tom's expression shifted from amusement to concern. "You'd give up $2 million for unproven technology?" "It's not unproven. It works. It's better than anything on the market." Sarah's voice hardened with conviction. "I built it from nothing. I won't watch it die in some corporate archive." The conversation that followed was tense, with Tom alternating between incredulity and grudging admiration for her determination. Eventually, he agreed to arrange a meeting with TechForge's acquisition team the following morning. That night, in her modest two-bedroom apartment, Sarah sat at her kitchen table after the twins' bedtime, running calculations on her laptop. Noah and Ethan, now 5 years old and impossibly bright, had started kindergarten that fall, already reading at a third-grade level and solving math problems that bewildered their teachers. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "You're actually going through with this insanity?" Miranda's voice carried equal parts concern and respect. "I've made up my mind," Sarah confirmed, glancing at a framed photo of the twins building a block tower together, their dark heads bent in identical concentration. "This system is my future. Our future. And if they say no, they won't. TechForge wants this acquisition to go smoothly. My system is valuable but not critical to their plans. They'll consider it a reasonable concession to keep the transition drama-free." A long silence followed. "You've always been the smartest person I know," Miranda finally said, "but you'll need capital to develop this independently, even with your savings." "I've been thinking about that." Sarah hesitated. "Remember that loan you offered when I was pregnant? I think I'm finally ready to discuss terms." The next morning, Sarah walked into TechForge's temporary Chicago offices wearing her most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit she'd saved 3 months to purchase. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression betraying none of the nerves twisting her stomach. The negotiation was brutal. TechForge's legal team initially dismissed her request outright, then tried to diminish the value of her work. 3 hours in, with discussions growing increasingly heated, Sarah played her final card. "If you examine the code carefully," she said, sliding annotated printouts across the table, "you'll notice that the core authentication modules contain elements I developed independently prior to implementing them at Smart Secure. I have dated, documented proof." This wasn't entirely accurate. She had backdated some documentation, but they couldn't prove otherwise. The legal team conferred in hushed tones, then called for a recess. Tom pulled her aside in the hallway. "What are you doing? This could blow up the entire acquisition." "No, it won't," Sarah replied calmly. "They want Smart Secure too badly. They'll concede rather than risk complications." She was right. When negotiations resumed, TechForge's lead counsel presented new terms. Sarah would relinquish her ownership stake and any severance package in exchange for exclusive rights to her authentication system. She would be required to sign a non-compete clause preventing her from approaching Smart Secure's existing clients for 2 years. "Acceptable," Sarah said, extending her hand. That afternoon, she sat in her apartment, staring at the signed documents. She was officially unemployed with 2 5-year-old boys to support and no steady income. The safety net she'd worked so hard to build had vanished, replaced by a terrifying void of uncertainty. Her phone rang. "I just heard," Miranda said without preamble. "You actually did it." "I did." Sarah's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I've been running numbers since our call last night. I can offer you $20,000 as an initial investment. It's everything in my savings, but I believe in you." Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by her friend's faith. "I can't ask you to risk." "You're not asking. I'm offering. As a business decision, not charity." Miranda's tone brooked no argument. "Besides, I expect a significant return and the title of Chief Financial Officer in this venture." 3 days later, Sarah stood in a small, dilapidated office space in a rundown commercial building on Chicago's West Side. Paint peeled from the walls, water stains mottled the ceiling, and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew. But the rent was affordable, $800 monthly, and the location was only a 15-minute walk from the twins' school. "What do you think?" she asked Noah and Ethan, who explored the space with curious expressions. "It's dirty," Noah observed, tracing a finger through dust on the windowsill. "But it has potential," Ethan added, always the optimist. "Can we paint it blue?" "Any color you want." Sarah knelt between them. "This is going to be our company, Johnson Security Solutions." Noah's eyes widened. "Does this mean we're entrepreneurs now, Mommy?" "That's exactly what it means." She pulled them close, inhaling the clean scent of their shampoo. "We're building something that will be ours forever." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah and the twins painted the office themselves, covering water stains with cheerful blue paint. Second-hand furniture, desks, chairs, a sagging couch for the twins to do homework, filled the space gradually as Sarah found affordable pieces on online marketplaces. Her first office consisted of a used laptop perched on a desk from a university surplus sale, a single monitor, and a stack of business cards printed at the local copy shop. Sarah Johnson, CEO, Johnson Security Solutions, innovative security for the digital age. The twins settled into a routine, coming to the office after school, completing homework in their designated corner while Sarah worked. Some nights when deadlines loomed, they all slept on the office couch, the boys curled against her like they had as infants. The first weeks of business were soul-crushing. Sarah made dozens of cold calls daily, sent hundreds of emails, and walked into businesses unannounced, pitching her security system. Most doors remained firmly closed. No experience. No track record. Too small to trust with our security needs. Each rejection stung, but Sarah persisted, refining her pitch, developing custom demonstrations, showing potential clients exactly how her system could protect their specific vulnerabilities. 6 weeks in, with their modest funds dwindling alarmingly, Sarah stood outside a small jewelry store in Lincoln Park, gathering courage for another likely rejection. The recently robbed sign in the window had caught her attention, a potential client with an immediate security need. The owner, Eleanor Mills, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, listened skeptically to Sarah's pitch. "So you're telling me your system can prevent both physical and digital theft? And you're what? A one-woman operation?" "My team is small but specialized," Sarah answered, the practiced half-truth coming easily now. "We focus exclusively on customized security solutions." Eleanor studied the prototype demonstration on Sarah's laptop. "You seem very determined." "I am." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I understand being reluctant to trust a startup, but I also understand what's at stake for a small business owner. This isn't just theory for me, it's personal." Something in Sarah's expression must have resonated. "I'll give you a chance," Eleanor decided. "Not because I'm convinced, but because I respect another woman building something from nothing." That night, Sarah installed her system personally, the twins asleep on the jewelry store's small sofa, covered with her coat for warmth. As dawn broke, she completed the final configurations, exhaustion and triumph warring in her body. One client became two when Eleanor recommended Sarah to Dr. Michaels, whose medical clinic had suffered a data breach exposing patient information. The doctor's initial skepticism gave way to impressed approval when Sarah's demonstration revealed vulnerabilities in their system that 3 previous consultants had missed. "How did you spot that?" he asked, watching her fingers fly across the keyboard. "I look at security differently," Sarah explained. "When you've had to protect what matters most with limited resources, you develop a unique perspective." The medical clinic contract was substantial enough to keep Johnson Security Solutions afloat for another 2 months. Sarah celebrated with the twins that evening, the 3 of them eating pizza on the office floor, toasting with juice boxes. "To Johnson Security Solutions," Noah proclaimed with 5-year-old solemnity. "To our future empire," Ethan added, his smile revealing a missing front tooth. Sarah watched her sons, their faces animated as they discussed business strategy in childish terms and felt a fierce surge of pride. They'd come so far from the desperate days in shelters and borrowed rooms. This small, struggling company was just the beginning. The client who would walk through the door of Johnson Security Solutions 3 months later, a startup fintech with serious security issues, would not only save the fledgling company from bankruptcy, but introduce Sarah to the angel investor who would change everything. The investor who had walked into Johnson Security Solutions 3 years ago had transformed not just the company, but the entire trajectory of Sarah's life. As she stood at the window of her spacious Oakland office, watching the San Francisco Bay glitter in the distance, Sarah Johnson hardly recognized the desperate woman who had once read business books to premature twins in the NICU. At 30 years old, she commanded a team of 15 security specialists, with Miranda Chen serving as her trusted CFO, and the Johnson Security Solutions logo, a stylized shield designed by 8-year-old Noah, adorning the glass doors of their headquarters. The twins, now thriving third-graders, sat in the conference room adjacent to her office, their dark heads bent over laptops as they worked on a coding project their school had deemed too advanced for the regular curriculum. Sarah watched them through the glass partition, marveling at how they had inherited her determination, along with Maxwell Reed's striking blue eyes, a genetic gift that sometimes made her heart twist when she caught them in certain light. "The quarterly reports are ready for review," Miranda announced, entering with a tablet. "We're up 17% from last quarter, and the Westbrook investment is paying dividends beyond projections." Daniel Westbrook had been the miracle that walked through their door after Sarah saved FinTech Solutions from a catastrophic security breach. The venture capitalist had arrived unannounced at their modest office space, curious about the security genius who accomplished in 48 hours what his entire tech team couldn't solve in 3 months. Sarah smiled at the memory as she accepted the tablet from Miranda. "Has Daniel confirmed for the strategy meeting tomorrow?" "Yes, and he's bringing potential investors from Singapore." Miranda hesitated. "They're particularly interested in the new patent applications." The patent applications represented the culmination of 3 years of relentless work. Sarah's original security protocol expanded and refined into something revolutionary. If approved, they would cement Johnson Security Solutions as a serious contender in the cybersecurity marketplace. A commotion from the conference room drew their attention. Ethan had jumped up, pointing excitedly at his screen while Noah clapped his hands in victory. "I think they solved it," Miranda observed with a smile. "Those boys are scary smart." "Like their mother," came a deep voice from the doorway. Daniel Westbrook stood there, his 6'4" frame filling the entrance, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled as always. At 52, the venture capitalist had become not just their primary investor, but a mentor to Sarah and something of an uncle figure to the twins. "You're early," Sarah said, extending her hand, which Daniel ignored in favor of a brief hug. "Wanted to see the operation before the suits arrive tomorrow." He nodded toward the twins. "What are the prodigies working on now?" "A simple encryption algorithm," Sarah explained. "They've been obsessed with cryptography since watching that documentary on the Enigma machine." Daniel shook his head in amazement. 8-year-olds developing encryption algorithms while my 16-year-old nephew can barely remember his Instagram password." In the conference room, the boys had noticed Daniel's arrival and were waving enthusiastically. He waved back before turning to Sarah, his expression growing serious. "I've been reviewing the latest valuation models. With the pending patents and the government contract we're bidding on next month, I think it's time to discuss a significant funding round." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "How significant?" $2 million for 20%. The figure hung in the air between them. Sarah quickly calculated in her head, a $10 million valuation for the company she had built from nothing. "That's generous," she said carefully, "but I've been thinking closer to 15%. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but his mouth curved upward. $13 million valuation? Bold. "Realistic," Sarah countered. "The intellectual property alone, the market hasn't fully validated." The fintech rescue proves market validation. Miranda cleared her throat. Perhaps we should continue this in the conference room? With actual spreadsheets? 3 hours later, the deal was struck. $2 million for 15%, valuing Johnson Security Solutions at just over $13 million. Sarah signed the preliminary papers with steady hands, though her heart raced with the magnitude of what was happening. "To the next chapter," Daniel said, raising a paper cup of water in lieu of champagne. "To believing in potential," Sarah replied pointedly, thinking of Maxwell's dismissal years ago. The following week was a whirlwind. With Daniel's investment secured, Sarah leased a proper office space in downtown Oakland, 5,000 square feet with views of the bay, modern security systems, and actual walls instead of the partitions they'd been using. She hired 3 senior engineers from top tech companies, a dedicated sales team, and a marketing specialist. Most importantly, she finally purchased a house, a modest 3-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good schools, a small backyard where the twins could play, and bedrooms they wouldn't have to share for the first time in their lives. On moving day, Sarah stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, still disbelieving. The twins raced from room to room, their excited voices echoing off bare walls. "Mom! Mom!" Ethan called, running back to her. "Can we really put holes in the walls for our posters? Like, with actual nails?" The question caught Sarah off guard, a poignant reminder of how little they'd had for so long. In the subsidized apartments and temporary housing, personalization had been forbidden. No nails, no paint, nothing that couldn't be easily removed. "Yes, baby," she said, kneeling to his level. "This is our home. You can hang anything you want." "Even my solar system model from the ceiling?" Noah asked, joining them with wide eyes. "Even that," Sarah confirmed, pulling them both into a hug to hide the sudden tears in her eyes. That evening, as she unpacked kitchen boxes, the doorbell rang. On the porch stood a delivery person with 2 large packages. Delivery for Noah and Ethan Johnson? Inside the boxes were state-of-the-art laptops with drawing tablets, professional programming software, and a note from Daniel. "Talents like these need to be cultivated. Consider it an investment in future tech geniuses. DW." The twins' faces when they opened the gifts were worth every struggle of the past 8 years. Sarah took a photo of them hugging their new computers, their grins wide enough to split their faces. Later that night, after the boys had finally fallen asleep in their new rooms, Sarah sat on her back porch with a rare glass of wine, gazing at the stars visible beyond the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. "You did it. You actually did it." 6 months after the move, Johnson Security Solutions had expanded again, adding 2 more patents to their portfolio and securing their first government contract, a cybersecurity project for the Department of Transportation that pushed their valuation past $20 million. To celebrate their first year of profitability, Sarah surprised the twins with a trip to Disney World. 5 days of pure childhood joy without worrying about work, money, or the future. Watching Noah and Ethan laugh uncontrollably on Space Mountain, their faces lit with uncomplicated happiness, Sarah realized they were experiencing something she had never known as a child: the freedom from the burden of adult worries. On their last night in Florida, as fireworks exploded over Cinderella's castle, Noah leaned against her side. "This is the best day ever, Mom." "The best day so far," she corrected, kissing the top of his head. The return to Oakland brought one final surprise. As their taxi pulled up to their house, Sarah noticed lights on inside. Lights she was certain she'd turned off before their trip. "Wait here," she told the twins, cautiously approaching the front door. It swung open before she reached it, revealing Miranda and the entire Johnson security team crowded in the living room beneath a banner that read, "Welcome home, boss." "What is this?" Sarah asked, stunned, as the twins pushed past her with excited shouts. "A proper welcome," Miranda explained, hugging her friend. "You've been so focused on building the company, you never stopped to celebrate what you've accomplished." The house had been decorated with photos chronicling their journey. Sarah graduating with honors, the twins' first day of school, the original tiny office, the contract signing with Daniel, the new headquarters ribbon cutting. A lifetime of struggle and triumph displayed in a visual timeline. Sarah moved from image to image, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of their path. In one corner stood a framed copy of their first client contract with the jewelry store. In another, the patent approval letter. At the end of the display was a recent magazine feature. Rising Stars in Tech. Johnson Security Solutions disrupts cybersecurity paradigm. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to cry openly, surrounded by the team that had believed in her vision. Miranda embraced her tightly, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." That night, after the celebration ended and the twins were asleep amid their Disney souvenirs, Sarah sat on her back porch again, this time scrolling through business news on her tablet. A small item caught her eye. Reed Properties was facing investor scrutiny after a failed luxury development in Miami had hemorrhaged money. The accompanying photo showed Maxwell Reed looking harried as he avoided reporters' questions. Sarah closed the article without reading further. Her success wasn't about his failure, it was about her own journey and the family she'd built. As she gazed at the night sky, Sarah Johnson felt a peace she had never known before. From a homeless pregnant waitress to the CEO of a rising tech company valued at over $20 million, she had transformed not just her life, but her son's futures. While Johnson Security Solutions celebrated its new phase in Chicago, Reed Properties faced its first major financial scandal, with Maxwell Reed appearing on newspaper covers for reasons far less glorious than Sarah. While Reed Properties faced public scrutiny, Sarah Johnson's star continued to rise. 4 years had transformed Johnson Security Solutions into Johnson Innovation Technologies, a powerhouse occupying 15 floors in San Francisco's financial district. Sarah, now 34, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her executive office. The skyline spread before her like a kingdom she had rightfully claimed. "The server migration is complete, Ms. Johnson," announced her executive assistant, Tanya. "And the design team has finalized the presentation for next week's Department of Defense meeting." Sarah nodded, her platinum bob catching the afternoon light. The dramatic hair transformation, from her natural brown to this striking silver blonde, had been her gift to herself after their valuation passed $500 million last year. A statement piece, like the Richard Mille watch that now adorned her wrist, replacing the drugstore timepiece she'd worn for years. "Thank you, Tanya. Is Miranda ready for our 3 o'clock? She's waiting in the conference room with the acquisition team." The Johnson Innovation Technologies conference room, all glass, steel, and breathtaking views of the Golden Gate Bridge, housed Miranda Chen and 4 senior executives analyzing projections for their latest acquisition target, FinLockTech, a promising startup specializing in financial transaction security. "The numbers for next quarter are confirmed, Ms. Johnson," Miranda reported as Sarah took her seat at the head of the table. "Wall Street is projecting a 22% increase in share value after the announcement." Sarah glanced at the watch on her wrist, the Richard Mille RM037 that had cost $285,000. She'd purchased it the day their company valuation hit $1 billion, remembering how Maxwell had adjusted his Patek Philippe, as he'd told her she had no potential. "Schedule the announcement for after the New York Tech Conference," Sarah decided. "I want to be present when the shares surge." On the wall-mounted monitor behind Miranda, a slide transitioned to show images of recent company milestones interspersed with photos of Noah and Ethan, now 12 years old. The twins had blossomed into remarkable young men, already taking advanced placement courses and developing their 3rd mobile application, an accessibility tool for visually impaired users that had gained international recognition. The journey to this moment had been relentless. After Daniel Westbrook's initial investment 4 years ago, Sarah had methodically built her empire. When their authentication protocol became the industry standard 2 years later, larger funding rounds followed. Sarah had maintained controlling interest through each expansion, now owning 51% of a company valued at $3.2 billion. "The acquisition paperwork is ready for your signature," Miranda said, sliding a leather portfolio across the polished table. "This will make Finlock Tech our 5th strategic acquisition in 3 years." Sarah reviewed the documents carefully before signing. Each acquisition had been carefully chosen to complement their core technology, creating an ecosystem of security solutions that dominated the market. "Their founder is quite impressive," commented James Wilson, head of strategic development. 26 years old, Princeton graduate, reminds me of you when we first met." Sarah smiled. "Except I was a single mother of twins with no Ivy League degree." She signed the final page with her Mont Blanc pen, another luxury she'd once denied herself. "Make sure the transition package for their team is generous. Talent retention is our priority." After the meeting, Sarah returned to her office where Tanya waited with her afternoon schedule. Noah and Ethan's school called. They've been invited to present their visual assistance app at the National Young Innovators Conference next month. Pride surged through Sarah. "Book 3 first-class tickets. We'll make a weekend of it." "Already done. Also, your reservation for tomorrow's flight to New York is confirmed, first class. The driver will be here at 5:30 in the morning." "And the boys?" "Already packed and ready. Everything is arranged for the Princeton and Columbia visits after the conference." Sarah smiled, remembering how her sons had insisted on touring East Coast universities, though she suspected they would be reluctant to move so far from her when the time came. The bond between the three of them remained unbreakable, forged in the crucible of those early desperate years. "The plaza confirmed the presidential suite," Tanya continued. "The conference begins at 10 on Monday with your panel at 2. The technology industry gala dinner is at 8 at the Metropolitan Club." Sarah checked her calendar, noting the additional meetings scheduled around the conference. Johnson Innovation Technologies was about to announce a groundbreaking partnership with the federal government for security systems, another massive step forward. That evening, as her private elevator descended to the underground parking garage where her driver waited, Sarah scrolled through industry news on her tablet. A small item caught her attention. Reed Properties was seeking technology partners for smart building initiatives after several quarters of declining revenues. She dismissed the article with a swipe of her finger. Maxwell Reed's business troubles were not her concern, though she occasionally checked on Reed Properties' performance out of old habit. The company had struggled since Maxwell took over following his father's death 3 years ago, with reckless investments and 2 failed marriages complicating his professional life. The following morning, Sarah's private jet lifted off from San Francisco International Airport, carrying her and the twins eastward. Noah and Ethan occupied the leather seats across from her, engrossed in their laptops as they fine-tuned their latest project, a machine learning algorithm that could predict security vulnerabilities in networked systems. "Mom, look at this," Noah called, turning his screen toward her. "We've increased detection accuracy by 17%. Sarah moved to sit beside them, examining their code with genuine interest. At 12, the boys possessed technical skills that rivaled many of her senior developers. Their dark hair and striking blue eyes, so reminiscent of their father, contrasted with minds that were entirely their own. "The pattern recognition is impressive," she noted. "Have you considered implementing this in the accessibility app?" "That's exactly what we were thinking," Ethan confirmed. "It could help predict user needs based on navigation patterns." As the jet cruised at 35,000 feet, Sarah marveled at these extraordinary young men she'd raised. Despite their privileged lifestyle, they remained grounded, kind, and driven by a desire to create technology that helped others, values she had instilled during years of struggle. They never asked about their father. Sarah had told them only that he wasn't ready to be a father, a gentle version of the brutal truth. They seemed satisfied with this explanation, secure in the knowledge that their mother had always been enough. The New York skyline appeared beneath them as the jet began its descent. From this height, The city looked like a glittering circuit board, each light a component in a complex system, not unlike the security networks Sarah had built her fortune protecting. "I've never seen the city from above at night," Noah murmured, pressing his face to the window. "It's like a living organism," Ethan added, each light representing thousands of people. Sarah watched her son's wonder with a full heart. This trip represented everything she had fought for, not just material success, but the ability to show her children a world of possibilities that once seemed hopelessly out of reach. The Plaza Hotel welcomed them with the deferential service reserved for elite guests. The presidential suite, larger than their entire first apartment, offered panoramic views of Central Park. As the boys explored the suite with excitement, Sarah caught her reflection in a gilded mirror. The woman who gazed back bore little resemblance to the desperate waitress of 15 years ago. Designer clothing had replaced thrift store finds. The once exhausted face was now serene and confident, enhanced by subtle cosmetic procedures that erased the strain of those early years. Her platinum bob framed features that had grown sharper, more defined, as if hardship had chiseled away everything superfluous. "Mom, can we order room service?" Ethan called from the dining room. "They have chocolate souffle?" "Order whatever you like," Sarah replied, smiling at their continued amazement at such luxuries, despite years of privileged living. Later that evening, as she reviewed her conference presentation, Sarah received an email from her executive team. The federal security contract was confirmed, a $700 million deal that would likely push their stock value to record heights when announced. She forwarded the news to Miranda with a simple message: "We did it." Miranda's reply came seconds later. "Never doubted you for a minute. The girl who studied business textbooks while nursing twins was destined for this." Sarah closed her laptop and walked to the windows, gazing at the city lights. Tomorrow she would lead a panel discussion on the future of cybersecurity, addressing hundreds of industry leaders as an acknowledged expert. Her journey from that small Chicago apartment to this moment seemed almost mythical in its trajectory. On her nightstand, the conference agenda lay open, attendee profiles tabbed for review. She hadn't noticed the name buried in the list of participants: Maxwell Reed, CEO, Reed Enterprises. His company's recent pivot towards smart building technology had apparently earned him an invitation to the technology conference. As her sons slept peacefully in their adjoining room, Sarah Johnson stood at the pinnacle of her career. 15 years of relentless work had culminated in a position that even her most ambitious dreams hadn't fully envisioned. What she didn't know was that in just 3 days, her past and present would collide with devastating force. The Businessweek magazine she casually flipped through contained 2 pieces of news that would change the course of her life: the technology conference in New York, where she would be the keynote speaker, and the announcement that Maxwell Reed, after his second divorce and growing financial problems, would be present seeking partners to save his declining empire. Sarah closed the Businessweek magazine, her finger lingering on the small photograph of Maxwell Reed accompanying an article about struggling real estate developers seeking tech partnerships. 15 years had transformed him. Salt and pepper hair replacing the dark brown she remembered, lines etched around his eyes, a heaviness to his jaw that spoke of age and perhaps discontent. The article mentioned his second divorce, finalized 6 months ago, and Reed Enterprises' declining stock value following failed developments in Miami and Seattle. "Just another CEO past his prime," she murmured, setting the magazine aside and returning to her conference preparation. The morning of the Global Technology Conference dawned clear and crisp over Manhattan. Sarah stood on the balcony of the Plaza's presidential suite, sipping espresso and watching early joggers navigate Central Park's winding paths. Behind her, the sounds of the twins preparing for the day filled the suite, Noah debating which tie complemented his navy blazer while Ethan reviewed university brochures over breakfast. "The Columbia engineering program seems more aligned with our interests," Ethan called to his brother. "But Princeton's computer science department has that quantum computing initiative. We've got 3 more years before decisions," Sarah reminded them, returning inside. Today's about the conference, tomorrow's about campus tours. Her personal stylist arrived at 8, transforming Sarah's platinum bob into a sleek, sophisticated style that framed her face perfectly. The makeup artist followed, creating a subtle look that enhanced her features while maintaining the professional appearance expected of a female CEO. By 9:30, Sarah stood before the full-length mirror, appraising the finished result: a custom Armani pantsuit in deep midnight blue, Louboutin heels adding 3 inches to her height, the Richard Mille watch gleaming on her wrist. "You look amazing, Mom," Noah said, appearing beside her in the mirror, his own reflection a startling echo of the father he'd never met. "Both my handsome escorts ready?" she asked, smiling at Ethan, who joined them, adjusting his glasses, the only feature distinguishing him from his identical twin. The Johnson Innovation Technologies car, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, delivered them to the conference center where attendees with name badges milled about the entrance. Heads turned as they approached, whispers following in their wake. That's Sarah Johnson and her prodigy sons. Youngest billionaire in tech. Heard the accessibility app they developed has 2 million users already. Inside, the conference hummed with activity. Tech demonstrations occupying the exhibition hall, presentation rooms filled with industry leaders, networking lounges buzzing with conversation. Sarah navigated the space with practiced ease, greeting competitors and collaborators alike, introducing the twins to key contacts, her hand occasionally resting protectively on one boy's shoulder. The CEO of Google intercepted them near the main stage. "Sarah, finally we meet in person. Those security protocols your team developed for cloud storage, revolutionary." "Thank you, Roger. Let me introduce my sons, Noah and Ethan." The boys shook hands confidently, Ethan launching into a technical question about quantum encryption that visibly impressed the Google executive. Sarah watched with quiet pride as her sons held their own in conversation with one of technology's most powerful figures. Throughout the morning, they moved through the conference like minor royalty, Sarah scheduled to lead the afternoon's most anticipated panel: the future of integrated security systems. The twins would attend, seated in the front row, before joining a special youth innovation workshop later. At noon, they retreated to a private lounge reserved for keynote speakers and special guests. Sarah reviewed her notes while the boys discussed their morning observations, their analysis of various technologies demonstrating comprehension far beyond their 12 years. The neural network demonstration was conceptually interesting but practically flawed, Noah observed, buttering a roll from the catered lunch. Their training data set is too limited. "And did you notice the security vulnerabilities in the smart home exhibit?" Ethan added. "I counted at least 3 exploit opportunities." Sarah smiled, remembering how she'd once read business textbooks to them in incubators. "Perhaps you should mention those vulnerabilities to the developers, diplomatically." At precisely 2 o'clock, Sarah took the stage for her panel, commanding the attention of 500 attendees with natural authority. For 60 minutes, she led a discussion on evolving security threats and emerging protective measures, her expertise evident in every response, her predictions about industry direction quoted in real time on technology blogs. From the front row, Noah and Ethan watched their mother with undisguised admiration, occasionally exchanging glances when particularly insightful points aligned with discussions they'd had at home. What none of them noticed was the man who slipped into the back of the room midway through the panel, Maxwell Reed, standing against the wall, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock as he registered not only Sarah's transformation, but the 2 young boys in the front row who occasionally turned to whisper to each other, their profiles hauntingly familiar. After the panel concluded to enthusiastic applause, Sarah was immediately surrounded by attendees seeking further conversation. The twins waited patiently until she motioned them forward, introducing them to the CTO of Microsoft, who expressed interest in their accessibility application. "We're expanding the voice recognition capabilities in the next update," Noah explained. The algorithm adapts to speech patterns affected by neurological conditions, Ethan elaborated, improving accuracy by approximately 40% over standard systems. The Microsoft executive handed them his card. "Send me the technical specifications. We might have some collaborative opportunities." As they moved toward the exhibition hall, an event coordinator approached. "Ms. Johnson, the industry gala begins at 8 tonight at the Metropolitan Club. Your table is confirmed. Center position, as requested." "Perfect. We'll return to the hotel to change first." The coordinator hesitated. "I should mention, the seating arrangements were adjusted slightly. Reed Enterprises requested a table near the stage for Mr. Reed's presentation about smart building integration." Something cold and sharp twisted in Sarah's stomach. "I wasn't aware Maxwell Reed was speaking tonight. Last-minute addition to the program. His company is announcing a technology partnership initiative." Sarah maintained her neutral expression. "I see. Thank you for the information." At the plaza, as they prepared for the evening, Sarah stood before the mirror longer than necessary, scrutinizing every detail of her appearance. She had selected an Elie Saab gown in midnight blue, its elegant simplicity a statement of confidence. The stylist arranged her platinum hair in a sophisticated updo, while the makeup artist enhanced her features with subtle contouring and a bold red lip. The twins entered her room in perfectly tailored tuxedos, their adolescent frames already showing hints of the men they would become. At 5'10", they had recently surpassed her height, their growth spurt transforming them from children to young men seemingly overnight. "Remember," Sarah instructed as they rode to the Metropolitan Club, "this evening is about observation and learning. You don't need to discuss business unless you're comfortable." "And to intimidate potential suitors of yours," Noah joked, adjusting his glasses. "As if anyone would be brave enough to try," Ethan added with a grin. Sarah smiled, grateful for their light-hearted banter that eased her growing tension. She hadn't planned on encountering Maxwell tonight, or ever. The possibility that he might recognize his own features in the twins sent a wave of anxiety through her chest that she ruthlessly suppressed. The Metropolitan Club glowed with old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers illuminating marble columns and gilded details. Approximately 300 guests in formal attire circulated with champagne flutes containing $500 per bottle vintage. The elite of America's technology and business worlds mingled, venture capitalists seeking the next unicorn, established tech giants protecting their territory, innovative startups hungry for connections. Sarah arrived precisely at 8:15, late enough to avoid being first, early enough to make a notable entrance. With Noah and Ethan flanking her, she paused momentarily at the entrance, allowing the room to register their arrival. Her midnight blue gown contrasted elegantly with her pale skin and platinum hair, while the twins in their matching tuxedos created a striking visual trio. "There's the Google CEO in the corner," Sarah murmured, "and the Tesla founder is by the bar with investors." They moved into the room, Sarah acknowledging acquaintances with practiced grace. A waiter offered champagne, which she accepted while the twins took sparkling water. The Johnson family navigated the crowd with easy confidence, Sarah introducing her sons to key industry figures who invariably commented on the boys' impressive achievements. As the event host announced dinner, guests began moving toward assigned tables. Sarah placed her empty champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray, turning toward their table near the center of the room. That's when it happened. 10 meters away, standing as if he'd seen a ghost, Maxwell Reed stared directly at her. Time seemed to freeze as their gazes locked across the crowded room. 15 years had added silver threads at his temples and lines around his eyes, but he was unmistakably the same man who had once destroyed her world with casual cruelty. Maxwell's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The noise drew attention, but he remained motionless, his face draining of color as his gaze shifted from Sarah to the adolescents at her side. "Are you okay, Mom?" Ethan asked, noticing her sudden tension. In that moment, Maxwell's eyes moved from Sarah to the teenagers beside her. The shock on his face intensified as he registered his own features reflected in the boys, the jawline, the eye color, even the way Ethan furrowed his brow, identical to his own expression of concentration. "Perfectly fine," Sarah responded, recovering her composure. "Let's go to our table." Throughout dinner, Sarah felt Maxwell's gaze constantly upon her. His table sat 3 ahead of hers, allowing him to observe her every movement. When the conference president requested that distinguished guests introduce themselves, Sarah walked confidently to the stage. Sarah Johnson, CEO and founder of Johnson Innovation Technologies. Our company recently surpassed the $3 billion mark in market valuation, and we're proud to announce next week a historic partnership with the Department of Defense. Applause filled the hall. I'm also the proud mother of Noah and Ethan, who at 12 years old are already National Mathematics Olympiad semi-finalists and have developed an accessibility app used by more than 100,000 people with visual impairments. The spotlights briefly illuminated the twins, who waved politely, earning admiring looks from the assembled guests. When Maxwell introduced himself minutes later, his voice trembled slightly. "Maxwell Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises. We're looking to expand our portfolio into technological ventures after 75 years focused exclusively on real estate." After dinner, the inevitable confrontation occurred during cocktails. Maxwell approached, his body rigid as if walking to the gallows. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here." "Evidently," she replied with calculated coldness, a social smile fixed on her lips for observers around them. "You look different," he stammered. 15 years does that to people," Sarah replied, though some seem to change less than others. The twins approached, each holding a glass of sparkling water. The blood seemed to drain again from Maxwell's face. "These are my sons, yes. Noah, Ethan. This is Maxwell Reed, an old acquaintance." The teenagers extended their hands politely, unaware they were greeting their biological father. "You both look very much like your mother," Maxwell commented, his voice strained. "Actually, everyone says they take after their father," Sarah corrected with a sharp smile, "especially the eyes." The insinuation wasn't lost on Maxwell. He swallowed hard. "Sarah, could we speak privately, please?" "I don't see any need. Any pending business between us expired about 15 years ago." By this point, several nearby guests were observing the tense interaction, including the Forbes editor-in-chief who had recently interviewed Sarah. "Please," Maxwell insisted, visibly sweating. "It's important." Sarah considered for a moment. 5 minutes, on the terrace. On the illuminated terrace overlooking Central Park, Maxwell seemed smaller than in her memories. "They're my children, aren't they?" he asked directly. "Biologically speaking, yes. In every other aspect that matters, no." "Why didn't you ever tell me? About twins?" Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Your memory is convenient, Maxwell. You told me I was insufficient, boring, worthless. You offered me money to solve the problem and disappear. You threatened me with your lawyers if I attempted contact." On the terrace illuminated with a view of Central Park, Maxwell seemed smaller than in her memories. The crisp night air on the Metropolitan Club terrace carried the distant sounds of Manhattan traffic below, a stark contrast to the hushed tension between the two figures standing apart, one radiating confidence, the other visibly shaken. "I was young, stupid, scared," Maxwell stammered, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks, a nervous habit Sarah remembered from 15 years ago. "And I was a 22-year-old pregnant waitress without a home, without family, sleeping in shelters and working 3 jobs while vomiting between shifts due to pregnancy complications," Sarah replied, her voice level despite the fury simmering beneath. "Don't talk to me about being scared." Maxwell stepped closer, his expensive cologne, the same brand he'd worn all those years ago, reaching her. Sarah resisted the urge to step back, refusing to concede even an inch of ground. "If I had known they were twins, Would that have made a difference? You didn't want one child. Why would you have wanted two? Sarah's eyes glinted like steel in the terrace lighting. You made yourself perfectly clear. I was boring, predictable, and without potential. You offered me $50,000 to solve the problem and disappear. Maxwell flinched at hearing his own cruel words repeated back to him. I regret those words every day. How convenient that your regret arrives alongside my success. Sarah gestured to the glittering room behind them. Would you be standing here seeking reconciliation if I were still a struggling single mother instead of a billionaire CEO? The question hung between them, Maxwell's silence more damning than any response could have been. What do you want now? Sarah asked. Money? My sons are headed to the finest universities in the country, all expenses paid. My company is worth more than Reed Enterprises. I don't need your money now, just as I didn't need that pathetic $50,000 check I tore up. Maxwell paled further. I want to know them. I'm their father. No, Sarah corrected sharply. You're the sperm donor. A father is someone who wakes at 3 in the morning with fevers, who teaches bicycle riding, who helps with homework. I have legal rights. Try to claim them, Sarah challenged, her eyes flashing dangerously. I'd love to see you explain in court why you abandoned a pregnant woman without resources, offering money for an abortion. The press would adore that story about the great Maxwell Reed. At that moment, the terrace door opened. Noah and Ethan appeared, followed by several important guests, including the Forbes editor and the CTO of Microsoft. Mom, is everything okay? Noah asked, his perceptive gaze assessing the scene with intelligence beyond his years. Perfectly fine, darling. Mr. Reed was just congratulating me on Johnson Technologies' exponential growth, Sarah replied smoothly. Weren't you, Maxwell? Cornered, Maxwell nodded stiffly. Actually, Sarah continued, raising her voice so all could hear, Mr. Reed and I knew each other many years ago when I was a waitress in Chicago. A fascinating story about how life can change, from rejected waitress to billionaire CEO. She smiled sweetly. Some people bet on the right people, others miss valuable opportunities due to short-sightedness. A murmur rippled through the group of guests. The insinuation was clear. Mom, interrupted Ethan, always the more perceptive of the twins, staring fixedly at Maxwell. Is this? Someone who once thought I had no potential, Sarah completed, placing her hands on her son's shoulders. Shall we return inside? I heard the Microsoft CEO wants to discuss a possible collaboration. The look of devastation on Maxwell's face as Sarah guided the twins back toward the ballroom gave her no satisfaction, only a sense of chapters finally closing. Inside the ballroom, the evening continued with the practiced elegance of high society events, though whispers now followed both Sarah and Maxwell, connections being made, rumors starting to form. The Forbes editor cornered Sarah near the dessert table, her journalistic instincts clearly triggered. That was quite an interaction with Reed, she observed casually. Old friends, you said? Ancient history, Sarah replied with a practiced smile. Nothing newsworthy, I assure you. The editor's eyes gleamed with the recognition of a story. History has a way of becoming relevant again, especially when it involves two prominent business figures. Before Sarah could respond, the twins approached, rescuing her from the conversation. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of networking and polite conversation, Maxwell keeping his distance but his gaze following her constantly. At 11:30, Sarah's driver texted that the car was waiting. She gathered the twins, making gracious farewells to key contacts as they departed. In the privacy of the plaza's presidential suite, Sarah kicked off her Louboutins and sank onto the plush sofa, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache where 15 years of suppressed emotions had been stored. Mom, Ethan said quietly, sitting beside her. That man, Maxwell Reed. He's our biological father, isn't he? Sarah looked up sharply. Noah stood by the fireplace, his expression equally serious. They were too perceptive to be fooled, these brilliant boys she'd raised. "What makes you think that?" she asked carefully. "The way he looked at us," Noah answered, "like he was seeing ghosts." "And your comment about us having our father's eyes," Ethan added. "Plus basic math. We're 12. You knew him 15 years ago." Sarah sighed deeply. She'd always promised herself she would never lie to them when they asked directly. "Yes, Maxwell Reed is your biological father." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a glance that conveyed entire conversations after years of twin telepathy. "Why didn't you tell us?" Noah asked, the more emotional of the two. "Because he chose not to be part of our lives," Sarah answered simply. "And after a while it didn't seem relevant anymore. You never needed him." "He rejected us before we were even born," Ethan stated, analytical as always. "He rejected the idea of you," Sarah corrected gently. "He didn't know you as people. That was his loss, not ours." The twins absorbed this information with remarkable composure, asking practical questions about genetic health history and whether Maxwell had tried to contact them over the years. Sarah answered truthfully, omitting only the most painful details of her homelessness and desperation. "Will he try to be part of our lives now?" Noah asked, a note of worry in his voice. "Only if you want that," Sarah assured them. "You're old enough to have a say in this. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. I don't think I want anything to do with someone who abandoned you when you needed him most," Ethan said firmly. Noah nodded in agreement. "We already have everything we need." Sarah gathered them into a tight embrace, marveling at their maturity and the unbreakable bond the three of them had formed through years of struggle and triumph. "Get some sleep," she told them eventually. "We have university tours tomorrow." After the twins retired to their rooms, Sarah stood at the window overlooking Central Park, her reflection ghostly in the glass. She looked every inch the billionaire CEO, designer dress, perfect makeup, confident posture, a world away from the desperate waitress who had once sobbed on a shabby apartment floor. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please, we need to talk. Maxwell." She deleted it without responding, then silenced her phone as 3 more messages arrived in quick succession. Sleep eluded her that night. Sarah lay awake, memories she'd carefully compartmentalized over the years flooding back. The humiliation of being fired from Magnolia Restaurant when her pregnancy began to show, sleeping in her car during Chicago winters, reading business textbooks to premature twins in the NICU. Each hardship had forged her into the woman she was now. Each obstacle overcome had been a stepping stone. The morning broke clear and cold over Manhattan. Sarah was reviewing conference notes with her first cup of coffee when her phone began buzzing continuously. Opening her news alerts, she found the reason. Someone from last night's gala had leaked the connection between her and Maxwell Reed to the financial press. The Wall Street Journal had published a speculative piece about their shared past and the remarkable resemblance between Maxwell and Sarah's sons. Tanya called from San Francisco seconds later. "Ms. Johnson, our PR team is receiving press inquiries about last night. The Journal article is causing quite a stir. Prepare a statement acknowledging that Mr. Reed and I knew each other briefly in Chicago before my sons were born. Nothing more," Sarah instructed, "and hold all non-essential calls. I need to speak with the boys." When Noah and Ethan emerged from their rooms, Sarah had room service breakfast waiting and her tablet open to the Wall Street Journal article. "We need to talk," she said, gesturing to the news headline, "Tech CEO Johnson and real estate mogul Reed, a hidden connection?" The twins read the article silently, their expressions remarkably composed for 12-year-olds thrust suddenly into a public scandal. "The press is speculating about our connection to Maxwell Reed," Sarah explained. "I want you to be prepared for questions. We have nothing to hide, but you shouldn't have to deal with this." Noah looked up from the tablet. "Are we canceling the university tours? Do you want to?" The twins exchanged another of their silent communications. "No," Ethan decided. We're not ashamed of anything. Why should we change our plans? While Johnson Technologies' PR team managed the growing media interest, Sarah's phone continued receiving desperate messages from Maxwell. He had apparently been bombarded by press inquiries as well, and his company's stock had dropped 12% in early trading on rumors of the scandal. Sarah focused on her sons, accompanying them to tour Columbia's engineering department that afternoon. The campus visit coordinator seemed starstruck meeting the famous Johnson family, especially after that morning's news had elevated their profile even further. As they walked across the historic campus, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. Maxwell Reed's fiancée, Jennifer Blackwood, had publicly canceled their engagement following the scandal. The Texas oil heiress's statement was scathing. "I will not marry a man who abandoned his own children." While Sarah might once have felt satisfaction at Maxwell's public humiliation, now she felt only weariness and concern for her sons. They were handling the situation with remarkable poise, asking insightful questions during the campus tour, but she knew this unwanted attention affected them. That evening, as they returned to the plaza, the concierge approached discreetly. "Ms. Johnson, Mr. Maxwell Reed has been in the lobby several times today asking to see you. Hotel security has been instructed not to allow him to your floor." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "Please maintain that policy." In the presidential suite, Sarah called for a family meeting. "Maxwell is clearly desperate to speak with us. The decision about whether to meet with him should be yours," she told the twins. "Whatever you choose, I'll support you." After a brief private consultation, the twins reached their decision. "We want to meet him once," Noah said. "Not to build a relationship, but to understand." "To close this chapter," Ethan clarified. Sarah nodded. "I'll arrange it for tomorrow morning before our Princeton tour." The following morning, Maxwell Reed waited in the plaza's private conference room, documents spread across the polished table. He rose quickly when Sarah and the twins entered, his normally impeccable appearance noticeably disheveled, his tie slightly askew, dark circles under his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice ragged with emotion. "I've prepared some things: paternity recognition documents, a financial compensation plan for all these years, a proposal for the boys to receive shares in Reed Enterprises." "You really don't understand anything," Sarah interrupted, remaining standing. "We didn't come here to negotiate." "Ethan and Noah Johnson," Ethan introduced himself formally, extending his hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Reed." While Sarah watched the morning's Wall Street Journal headlines flashing on her phone, Reed Enterprises stock continuing its free fall while Johnson Technologies shares climbed, she couldn't escape the irony. The man who had once called her insufficient now desperately needed the family he had thrown away. Maxwell shook Noah's extended hand, visibly overwhelmed by emotion. His eyes moved between the twins, drinking in every detail of their faces, the jawline that mirrored his own, the blue eyes identical to those he saw in his mirror each morning, even the way Ethan tilted his head slightly when considering a response. "You are extraordinary," Maxwell said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've read about your achievements. The accessibility app for visually impaired users." "It was our mother's idea," Noah corrected, straightening his shoulders. "She taught us that true success is measured by how much you help others." Maxwell flinched at the pointed reminder of Sarah's influence. His gaze darted to the documents spread across the conference table. Legal papers, financial statements, stock certificates, all meaningless in the face of these remarkable young men regarding him with polite detachment. "I have so much to make up for," he continued desperately. "I want to be part of your lives. I can finance any university, open doors." "All the doors we need are already open," Ethan replied calmly. "Mom ensured that." The coolness in their voices was more devastating than outright hostility. Sarah remained silent, allowing her sons to handle the confrontation in their own way. She had prepared them for this meeting with simple facts. No embellishment needed to paint Maxwell as the villain. His actions spoke for themselves. Our purpose today, Noah explained with remarkable poise, is simply to inform you that we don't harbor resentments, but we also don't have space in our lives for a paternal relationship at this time. Perhaps in the future, when we're independent adults, we might consider some type of casual contact, Ethan added, his analytical mind already setting boundaries. Maxwell looked stricken, as if physically struck. These children who shared his DNA had inherited Sarah's strategic intelligence, emotional resilience, and an impressive maturity he himself had never achieved. These documents, Maxwell gestured weakly at the papers before him. I had my legal team prepare everything. Recognition of paternity, trust funds, shares in Reed Enterprises. We're not interested, Sarah interjected, stepping forward. The boys have my surname, substantial trust funds that I established, and will inherit my company someday if they wish. Reed Enterprises has 75 years of history, Maxwell argued, a note of desperation entering his voice. It's the Reed family legacy, which you've systematically destroyed with imprudent investments over the past 5 years, Ethan interrupted, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. I've studied the published financial reports. Your stock has fallen 40% since you assumed control. Maxwell stared at his son, stunned by the detailed knowledge. Mom taught us to conduct thorough research before any meeting, Noah explained with a small smile. Sarah felt a surge of pride watching her sons handle themselves with such composure. These children she had raised alone while working multiple jobs, studying through the night, building a business from nothing. They were her greatest achievement, far surpassing any corporate success. What do you want from me then? Maxwell asked, defeated, slumping back in his chair. Nothing, Sarah answered simply. This meeting isn't about wanting something, it's about closure. You made your choice 15 years ago, Maxwell. Now we make ours. The twins rose in unison, a synchronized movement born of their lifelong connection. It was a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reed, Noah said with perfect politeness. We wish you success in your future endeavors. And we hope you find peace with your past decisions, Ethan added. They walked toward the door, leaving Maxwell staring after them, his face a mask of loss and regret. Sarah lingered a moment longer, studying the man who had once shattered her world with casual cruelty. His custom-tailored suit hung slightly loose on his frame, suggesting recent weight loss. His once perfect hair showed signs of hasty styling, and the confident posture she remembered had given way to the slumped shoulders of a man confronting the consequences of his choices. You know what your greatest mistake was, Maxwell, Sarah said quietly. It wasn't rejecting me. It was not recognizing that the true value of a person isn't determined by their family name or bank account, but by their character. That's the lesson I taught our sons, and that's why they are extraordinary. As Sarah turned to leave, Maxwell called after her one final time. I've lost everything, haven't I? Not just the money, but what really mattered. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the broken man before her. Perhaps that realization is the beginning of your redemption. Goodbye, Maxwell. Walking down the corridor to rejoin her sons, Sarah felt a weight of 15 years finally lifting from her shoulders. This confrontation hadn't been about revenge or compensation, but about moving forward completely free, not as the rejected waitress or the CEO seeking validation, but as a woman who had built her life on her own terms. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Noah spontaneously wrapped his arms around his mother. You're amazing, you know that? The most extraordinary woman on the planet, Ethan agreed, joining the embrace. Sarah smiled at her sons, her true legacy, her greatest achievement. So, Columbia or Princeton? Actually, Noah replied with a conspiratorial smile, we were thinking Stanford, to stay close to you. The elevator reached the ground floor, doors opening to the future they had built themselves, a future where Maxwell Reed's name would be merely a footnote in their extraordinary story. As they exited the plaza, reporters had gathered on the sidewalk, alerted by the previous day's Wall Street Journal article. Camera flashes erupted as the Johnson family emerged, speculation about the twins' paternity now confirmed by multiple sources. "Ms. Johnson, is Maxwell Reed the father of your sons? How long have you kept this secret? Did Reed Enterprises provide financial support?" Sarah guided the twins through the media scrum with practiced ease, her security detail creating a path to their waiting car. "No comment at this time," she repeated calmly, shielding the boys from the most aggressive photographers. Once safely in the car, Ethan asked, "Will this affect the company?" "If anything, our stock will rise," Sarah replied, checking her phone. "People love an underdog story, and nothing resonates more than a single mother who built a billion-dollar empire while raising exceptional children." Her prediction proved accurate. By the time they arrived at Princeton for their campus tour, Johnson Innovation Technologies stock had climbed 7%, while Reed Enterprises continued its downward spiral, losing another 8% in morning trading. The university visit proceeded without incident, though Sarah noticed occasional whispers and pointed smartphones as people recognized them from the morning's news. The twins remained focused on the engineering facilities and research opportunities, undistracted by their sudden notoriety. That evening, as they flew home on the private jet, Sarah received a text message from Miranda. "The office is buzzing with the news. You okay?" "Better than okay," Sarah replied. "We're finally free." She gazed across the cabin at her sleeping sons, their faces peaceful in repose. The resemblance to Maxwell was undeniable, a genetic legacy that had given them his striking looks, but, thankfully, none of his character flaws. Nature had provided their blueprint, but nurture, her nurture, had shaped them into young men of integrity, intelligence, and compassion. In San Francisco, a crowd of paparazzi awaited them at the private terminal, the news of the Johnson-Reed connection having spread nationwide. Sarah's security team escorted them efficiently to the waiting car, the twins handling the sudden attention with remarkable poise. "Is this what being famous feels like?" Noah wondered as they pulled away from the airport. "This is what being notorious feels like," Sarah corrected. "It will die down soon. The media always finds a new story." At home, their beautiful house in Pacific Heights with its sweeping views of the bay, Sarah found flowers and a handwritten note from Daniel Westbrook. "Standing with you through this storm. Call if you need anything." The following morning brought news that Maxwell Reed had resigned as CEO of Reed Enterprises to focus on personal matters. The company's board had appointed an interim leader to stabilize operations after the stock had fallen nearly 30% in 2 days. When Sarah arrived at Johnson Innovation Technologies headquarters, her entire staff rose in a spontaneous standing ovation, a show of solidarity that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, deeply moved by their support. In her office, Miranda waited with coffee and financial reports. "The DoD contract announcement is scheduled for tomorrow. Marketing thinks we should delay given the current media circus." "No," Sarah decided. "We proceed as planned. This company wasn't built on hiding from challenges." The press conference the following day was the largest in company history. Journalists packed the auditorium, ostensibly to cover the announcement of the $700 million defense contract, but clearly hoping for comments about the Reed situation. Sarah, flanked by government officials and her executive team, addressed the contract first, outlining the groundbreaking security systems Johnson Innovation Technologies would provide. When the formal announcement concluded, she opened the floor to questions. Predictably, the first question came from the Wall Street Journal reporter. "Ms. Johnson, how do you respond to Maxwell Reed's statement this morning that he intends to build a relationship with his sons?" A murmur rippled through the room. Sarah hadn't seen any such statement. "My sons are 12 years old," she replied calmly. "Any decisions about relationships are made with their best interests at heart. Mr. Reed made his choice 15 years ago. We've made ours." Another reporter pressed, "Is it true you tore up a check for $50,000 that Reed offered you when you were pregnant?" Sarah's gaze turned steely. That's correct. It was the best investment decision I ever made. The room erupted in laughter, the tension broken. Sarah continued fielding questions with grace and composure, seamlessly transitioning back to the defense contract whenever possible. That evening, as the twins completed homework at the kitchen island, Sarah received one final text from Maxwell. "I understand now. I'm checking into rehab tomorrow. Not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better." She didn't respond, but felt a slight easing of the last remnant of bitterness she'd carried. Her journey had never been about him. It had been about proving to herself and to her sons that determination could overcome any obstacle. 3 months later, when the media frenzy had subsided and life had returned to a new normal, Sarah sat on her deck watching the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. Noah and Ethan were inside arguing good-naturedly over a robotics project, their voices carrying through the open French doors. In the elevator descending to the lobby of the plaza, Noah had spontaneously wrapped his arms around his mother. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.